Kenny. Kenny's up next. We've heard a little bit about Kenny the last couple of days, so I'll just jump to some of the things that that we didn't talk about. We heard about his time in the military as a pilot and his support for both combat operations and for medical evacuation. He's got an MBA and an MPA, one from the Kellogg School of Management and from Harvard Kennedy School. And then he went off to work on some pretty serious projects with Apple, which I spoke to him a lot last night, including leading the launch of one product and then and having a leadership role in the launch of AirPods. So just the AirPods, So after relocating to Canada, probably the best decision he made was to marry a Canadian. And now he's living in Calgary right now. And he's held some executive roles in several startups and scale-up companies, and later the chief strategy officer for Stars. So again, a lot of links there. And then joined MRBC, which we're very grateful for, out of a desire to build something meaningful in the service of complex and worthy challenge at the intersection of government and business.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for leading this session off. My name's Kenny Doleac, and I am a member of the MRBC team. I'll skip through that. We've just heard where we were, where we are today, and my job is to paint a little picture of, I should probably do this since I'm taller than the average bear, where we're going. And I want to do that through a story of possibility, a story of opportunity, and painting a simple vision where MRBC could be and intends to be in 5 years from today, operating with helicopters and airplanes on multiple bases and filling in some of the gaps that we've heard about over the last few days, providing 24/7 critical care. So I want to share that vision through three stories: the patient journey, the rural clinician journey, and the MRBC journey. And in telling these stories, I hope to share what change will look and feel like for patients, clinicians, and the healthcare system overall. I've tried to incorporate some of the themes that we've talked about over the last 2 days, and bring some of the concepts and practices that are being deployed around the world, but may or may not be being deployed here yet. So this is not intended to be inclusive of all that MRBC wants to do or is setting out to do, but simply highlight 3 topics in each of these 3 stories, and then I want to finish with a simple an analogy that I think represents what the theory of change that we're trying to enact here. So picture a backcountry ski accident just outside of one of our major ski resorts. A tree collision, a fractured pelvis, a spleen injury with internal bleeding, multiple rib fractures, a flail chest and collapsed lung, and a fractured femur. Now I'm only going to touch lightly on the clinical treatments because that's not my area of depth. And frankly, you guys have all talked so in depth about that over the last few days that I would like to highlight some more of the system design changes that I think will impact the journey. So first is decreasing decision time and dispatch. Some of the things contributing to this, so as we look forward in 5 years, this decision time has changed, and some of the things that contributed to that change is a critical care dispatcher that's one step away from the initial 911 activation system. The triage system has been updated to routinely and immediately establish video links based on initial phone triage, getting eyes on and the confidence to launch an aircraft faster, similar to what Katie mentioned yesterday, and also Alana mentioned today. Ultimately, the team is building a higher degree of confidence in less than 10 minutes. This is possible, and something we strive to do. Second is decreasing time to IC level care. I feel like some of the themes I'm talking about here have been talked about so much that it is redundant, but I think in the repeating and the reiterating, there is power. So first and foremost, bringing critical capability into an austere environment with an interprofessional team, opening up treatment options that just don't exist today and that will exist in 5 years' time. And second, and given the prevalence of austere topography in BC, winch capability to deliver that critical care is table stakes, or said another way, a must in BC. In this case, the team is delivered and subsequent patient retrieval happens day or night at the scene in the backcountry by winch or hoist. I don't know what the actual correct term is there. Thomas will tell me later, I'm sure. And finally, the continuity of responsibility, because the patient journey doesn't stop at tertiary. So MRBC stays involved after drop-off, tracking the patient's course, closing the loop between sending and receiving clinicians. Stephen mentioned this yesterday and said it better than I could. But the idea of staying in the loop and repatriating home. This sounds simple and or trivial, but it has some significant impacts. First, this is reducing patient time out of community and reducing tertiary bedlock. Second, it gives clinicians and health administrators in all corners of the province confidence and knowledge that effective flow is happening through a dynamic and interconnected system. And third, it enables us to build a full data picture of the entire patient journey, measuring the impacts of care with deep partnerships between the service, the health authority, and the academic researchers, measuring not just one segment of the patient journey, but longitudinal patient outcomes and system impacts. Again, sounds obvious, but very, very challenging to accomplish. And I think I personally want to tie this back to a point that Adrian made yesterday, is the system defines success as arrival at a tertiary care center, but from a nurse's perspective, the system defines success too early. And we agree with that perspective. So the second story. In this story, I want to tell you what change feels like for the clinicians practicing in these communities. So picture a small emergency department with one doctor and a team of nurses, or a nursing station like Aaron mentioned yesterday that has even fewer resources and more remoteness. The clinical case unfolds as a woman shows up with a ruptured ectopic pregnancy. Now, my understanding is this condition requires a tertiary level intervention and resuscitation in a timely manner, to drastically understate. But I'm not going to talk about the clinical intervention, but want to highlight three areas in the way that the support is provided to the rural team. So in 5 years' time, the first call for help is made and confidence is gained within minutes. Well, how does this happen? Over the last 5 years, we've painstakingly established a reputation of when you call, we will come. This is an ethos more than anything else. The clinician knows that within minutes that a critical care team has been launched and will do whatever it takes to get to them. Not best efforts, but any and all effort. The days of battling and navigating and negotiating a system for someone to come and help for hours on the phone, as we just heard about, well, those are thankfully a distant memory. And then while that team is en route, continuous virtual support is provided. The nursing team or that doctor is not alone, but rather real-time guidance is shared and stabilized, is shared in order to stabilize and deliver care. We're constantly endeavoring to reduce the sense of isolation and uncertainty that is inherently present in a resource-constrained environment. And third, I think it's the way that we intend to show up in a culturally safe and supportive way. This does not happen overnight with a simple decision. It happens through years of listening. It means that when we show up, we are not there to be heroes or save the day, but rather there to augment and support a department, clinic, or station. It means sometimes you treat in place and sometimes you transport, but this is done in collaboration with the clinicians and team in that community. And in this particular case, the transport to a tertiary care center. So again, those are three simple features of how we think we can support care and support the rural clinicians. So to make those first two stories a new normal rather than an exception, I want to tell you three simple ways that MRBC is building differently. First is what I'll call a relentless drive, and I think a couple of speakers have used relentless drive, and it's one of my favorite terms. I think Kavi mentioned it earlier. Relentless drive to get the patients at the edge, anywhere, anytime. I want to use an example of aviation innovation to illustrate, because we've talked quite at length about clinical innovation and over the course of the last 2 days. But before we do that, I want to take a pause to talk about how we're thinking about change. Where we currently stand in PHRM and BC today is from what I've heard and what I understand is somewhat far behind, or to be far behind. We believe in and indeed are demanding of ourselves that we don't just make incremental change, but rather attempt to leapfrog forward to be on par with global best in class. An analogy I like to use here is a place like Kenya, where and mobile money, where they completely bypassed decades of banking infrastructure development and went straight from mobile money enabled by cell phone technology. They let people send, store, and receive money via basic phones and local agent networks. So millions of people gain practical banking access overnight, in what we would call relative overnight. We believe it's possible to take a leap forward in best in practices as we look at respective programs from around the world and integrate them into a new service. So back to the aviation example. How am I doing on time? Okay. All right. So we're gonna start blazing here. Would you mind scrolling down just a little bit on that guy? So back to the aviation example. There's a few things that could be done differently, or could be adopted in that relentless drive for 1 or 2% better, so that darkness and weather is not the norm of saying no. These include things like advanced regionalized weather reporting that has been built and is available, because we don't want to make generalized area forecasts to make launch decisions. This means weather cameras and visibility at every rural hospital and clinic in BC. Yesterday, Nellie noted that many of the rural clinics don't have helipads, let alone weather visibility. This means fully utilizing what modern aircraft capabilities offer: low-level GPS corridors and precision GPS approaches to every helipad in every hospital in the province. And finally, every base that is operational can operate 24/7 with nighttime NVGs and rescue capabilities. These are all possible, and there is no defensible reason why we would not want this here in BC. Second, we intend to be part and contribute to a learning health system with unwavering commitment towards excellence. Stephen gave an example yesterday of a person just taking ownership and making things a wee bit better. I wish he was here to hear that very poor quote, but anyways, it's the idea that we can push this forward, not as an individuals or as a single entity, but part of a whole. And that includes things like psychological safe learning, feedback loops, and data transparency as part of an overall health system, not as an individual organization or a set of individuals. And that we believe in discipline, collaboration, and intend to help interconnect disparate parts of the health system, bringing people and partners, communities, donors, citizens, all part of the fabric of the health system to the table to solve this problem. And finally, interprofessional teams. We've talked about this so much that I'm just going to completely skip over this part, but this is integral to the approach that we've taken, and we believe that it's possible. Actually, I'm not gonna skip over, because there's a different aspect that I just can't do it, because there's a different aspect that hasn't been talked about, and that is about unlocking the bench strength in BC that we haven't talked about. That we estimate some 9,000 critical care trained nurses and doctors that currently are on the bench and can't get into the game, to use a sports analogy like Cavi did, that we intend to create a pathway to get into the game. And second, the days of clinicians needing to leave to be able to practice in this space, like we've heard from several today, and Kyle, if I can use you as an example of leaving and a desire to come back, we believe that there's an opportunity to create BC as an attractive place where when you couple cutting edge practice and the ability to leapfrog forward with the beauty and of BC and the mountains and the topography that we have. This should be a global best-in-class attractive place for people to come and practice of all clinical types. And so that is a key aspect of how we think we can build a reinforcing positive cycle of capacity building with interprofessional teams. And so I'll end with one analogy that I think I borrowed from the world of ecology that I think applies here, and it's the idea of a keystone species or keystone capability. So a guy named Robert T. Payne in 1966 did an intertidal experiment where he moved a top predator, in this case the starfish, and saw a cascading shift in the entire community. And from that, the research it revealed that some actors have an outsized impact on a system. That idea became more popularized and widely known with the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone, and I made the picture with a starfish and a helicopter and a wolf and a helicopter, and it just looks way better with a wolf and a helicopter. So I went with the second. But after the wolves returned, they put pressure on the elk and the deer, which began avoiding open river bottoms, which changed the grazing behaviors, which then let new vegetation rebound, which then helped the vegetation stabilize, and beavers and songbirds and the entire landscape space adapted. And they shifted the rules of movement and behaviors by just the introduction of one small species or one small keystone. And we believe that a really high-performing pre-hospital and retrieval critical care teams can have that strategic leverage point and can force or encourage or enable the flow and the behavior and the norms of the entire system to change around them. And so that's a analogy I would encourage us to think about and take forward. And now is the time for change. That is why we're here. And I would end with a quote from Nikki from yesterday, in her hope that a PHRM system that is coordinated, responsive, timely, deeply humane, and accountable. That is why we are here, and that is also our hope. Thank you.